The Business of Agriculture podcast is brought to you by Land Trust. Did you know sportsmen spend over $5 billion annually in hunter and angler access fees? Land Trust is a platform that connects sportsmen with farmers and ranchers like you who have untapped profits just by providing access to their land. Go to landtrust.com/BOA, as in Business of Agriculture, to see how much you might add to your bottom line.
Greetings. Hey, thanks for joining us here on another episode of the Business of Agriculture podcast. It's me, your host, Damian Mason, with a fantastic program for you today because we're going across the pond. That's right. We've got a gentleman who's joining me from England. He is the founder of a company called Hummingbird. Hummingbird is an artificial intelligence software platform, really just working for and with agricultural and food production. And so his customers are some of the biggest names in agriculture, multinational corporations that you see, that you use their products every day if you're in the business of agriculture. And I'm struck by what they're doing because they're doing what I think really identifies the future and where our industry is going. We're talking about utilization of artificial intelligence and technology to map out technology that's mapping out resource allocation, if you will, and a few other things. We're going to talk about carbon, we're going to talk about resource allocation, talk about environmentalism, we're going to talk about regulatory environment and how his company is serving some of that. And we're going to get his thoughts on where the industry is going and how you, dear listener, can prosper in tomorrow's agriculture. This episode, like so many for the last year and a half, is not just an audio where you get your audio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, but it's also a video. So if you want to see what this British fellow looks like, just go on the Damian Mason channel, click on the YouTube, type in Damian Mason channel, and you'll see me there. And please hit subscribe. It'll help my views. And also you can see who we're talking to. His name is Will Wells. He's the founder of Hummingbird. Will, thank you for being on the Business of Agriculture.
Thank you, Damian. It's a real pleasure to be on with you today.
Okay, I explained a little bit about your company, and you can do a heck of a better job because you are the founder. And then we're going to talk about really the stuff you're doing, the work that you're doing, and where you see this industry going, because we always are taking a look ahead. So did I do you justice when I said it was an artificial intelligence software platform for the business of agriculture, for producers and food companies?
You did it so well, Damian. You should almost work for us. But it's true. We are an AI platform for agri-food businesses. And I guess what that really means is that we use space asset data, so satellite data in particular, to help monitor sustainability across food supply chains. And with the advent of carbon markets and other regulatory reform that looks to reward farmers for being sustainable, using big data and AI is absolutely critical to measure it so that rewards can be given independently and that they can be verified properly.
All right, so you started this company. You're not an ag guy. You're a technology guy. You're an investor guy. Tell me the genesis.
My background is in hedge funds, and I used to invest in tech companies, but I grew up on a farm. My mother's a plant pathologist, and everyone in my family is obsessed with plants of some sort. So it really was in the blood and in my track record. And Hummingbird really unites all of that. We started off really as a kind of drones for farming business, and then migrated quite quickly into a satellite for food supply chains business. And really about 2 years ago, we were right at the crest of the wave in terms of what we now think of as regenerative ag. And we've been focusing on sustainability measurements ever since.
Okay, so how old is Hummingbird? 5 years, 6 years?
We're 5.5 years old. We've got 60 scientists, top class PhD data scientists working for us. Our biggest markets are Canada and the US. And our focus is ag businesses. So whilst farmers are often the end beneficiary or the end users, really we target the really large businesses, ag retail or the Cargills and Rabobanks and Yarras that sit between technology and farmers.
Okay. So yeah, your customers are Rabobank or John Deere or Cargill or whatever. And then what do you do for them? Why do they do business with Hummingbird? And then what's the thing that then ends up happening out here in these farms around where I live?
So I think one of the most interesting developments in the last couple of years is not only the proliferation of technology across the agricultural supply chain, but really consumers demanding to know where their food comes from, to know that it was produced sustainably. So Hummingbird's role, let's say for a Nestle or a PepsiCo, is to monitor that food production upstream at the source. So if you're a Nestle, for example, you're deeply concerned about deforestation close to the Amazon. Hummingbird will quite literally monitor whether the land use has changed. If you're someone like Rabobank or Cargill, and you're looking to reward farmers in the Midwest that switch to no-till, Hummingbird is able to use its satellites to verify on a field-by-field basis when that happened and what tillage intensity was switched. So it's about being a technology solution through B2B where farmers can benefit as a result.
Yeah, so really, what you're selling spy service. You're out here spying. Cargill says we're going to do a thing, or now the new thing is more and more, like you say. And I think this. I like my privacy, but I also been telling my audiences, Will, for a number of years, more and more we're going to see this where it's a license to sell. If you want to sell your product, you're going to have to adhere to certain, ESG as it now is known, environmental and social and governance standards. And then, so if your product's going to end up on a shelf at Walmart is going to have to be able to tell their customers, hey, we care about the earth. We're doing right by the land, blah, blah, blah. And so all of our stuff is raised this way. And you say, well, who the hell verifies that? And that's where your company comes in. And you're doing more than just a spy service, because ideally the operator is getting paid a premium for adhering to the standards, right?
Correct. And we're good spies. So we're Gandalf, not Sauron. And really,
what? No, wait. Say that again.
We're the white wizard, not the dark wizard. And that's from Lord of the Rings. But, we're good spies. And I guess most of the satellites we use are owned by NASA or the European Space Agency, and anyone can access them. And what we're trying to do is use satellite data or remote data to try and unlock a financial reward for a farmer. Now, what's super cool is that we're seeing beer companies, monitor the levels of chemicals used in barley farmers that supply them with the hope of having a carbon neutral beer. And those beer companies are looking to pay farmers that are more sustainable more money. Microsoft is sitting on the other end of a carbon trade. So if you're a farmer in the Midwest and you switch to no-till, Bill Gates might pay you to do that. And massive clothing companies are looking to offset their own carbon emissions through the cotton farms that supply them. So whether it's crop water management or using less synthetic fertilizer, or maybe a different way of treating the soil, there are so many ways now to get rewarded for those switches. But it is still at an early stage. It's very exciting though.
Yeah. Okay. So you just talked about a number of things that are happening. That's why I wanted to have you on here, Will, to talk about where this business is going. So I say yes, that because the companies have to answer to shareholders and they have to be still promotionally oriented and they've got to play their thing, whether it's, whether you call it just pretend or not, the reality is Walmart needs customers. All these big companies need to put out their whole we care about the world thing. And if that means we're going to tell our farmers they, like you said, have to cut back pesticide use or reduce tillage or whatever because of environmental concerns, there's going to be either carrot or stick, right? We're going to pay you to do that, or we're going to not buy off you if you don't do that, carrot, stick. But somebody's verifying it. That's where you come in.
That's where we come in. And I think a couple of things are happening. So policy and government sentiment is really in the favor of everything that we described. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you've got organizations like Kellogg's committing to helping 400,000 farmers become sustainable, or organizations like Nestle saying we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. Now, these big corporations have made big claims, but very few people have thought, how's it really going to happen? So we're seeing an incredible amount of pioneering breakthrough technology that looks to enable this. And carbon trading is part of it. So is credit accreditation. Hummingbird's role is very small and simple, which is the verification partner. And, because financial rewards are on the line and because it's very exposed to fraud, it's really important that the AI is done independently, but that it also works, because otherwise you've got a whole incentive scheme that's skewed and won't survive in the long term.
Okay, so it's not really a market yet. All these things we talk about, Will, it's not really a marketplace yet. It's not really, I've had people on here talk about carbon, and I get it that some people are being paid for carbon, but it's not as though right now, if I have a bushel of corn, I can drive down the road to an ethanol plant or a grain elevator, and I can sell that bushel of corn all day long. I can't do that with carbon. And then also, I don't have anybody coming here wanting to give me money to prove that I'm verifying my practices. So it's still kind of the Wild West. What's happening in that front? Is it becoming more systematized? Is it becoming more true market?
So I think whilst Hummingbird is North America focused, we do operate in Europe and Australia and in Brazil. And what's interesting is that it's not the Wild West everywhere. And in fact, a number of different business models are emerging, all of which support a switch to sustainable ag. So for example, in Europe, as many listeners will know, farmers are paid a flat subsidy per acre per year. And multiple countries, France, Germany, the UK, are looking to replace that with almost like a sustainability credit. So you will get paid, but only if you're producing beef or you're growing grass or you're producing corn in a sustainable way. So there's a government-backed subsidy scheme. That's number one. Number two is...
And then there's always the question of defining that. What the hell does that mean? It's I guess the standards can be set, but then, does it mean this amount of cover crops that you never use tillage, you use tillage once every 3 years? I mean, it's kind of like it's not really there yet, right?
I think so. But what's fascinating is that if you look at the USDA Comet tool or NORI or the Australian Climate Solutions Fund or the German government, everyone is kind of focused on the same things. So biodiversity, expanding crop rotations, not cutting down forests, using less synthetic fertilizer, using water responsibly. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out, but if you focus on those themes, you're going to unlock rewards. So Hummingbird's algorithms, our AI, is focused on measuring exactly what I just mentioned from space in a really cheap way that will cost, let's say, less than $1 an acre for a reward that might be $15 plus per acre.
Okay. The reward is a government subsidy in this case.
A government subsidy or a carbon credit, or General Mills or Kellogg's paying you more for your produce than someone that's not sustainable. There are sort of multiple ways to skin this cat, but the financial transaction is coming from a number of places in our view. And I think probably the last place that it's not coming from yet is banks. And I think that green finance or access to finance and insurance based on how sustainable you are will be a massive sort of unlocking of the whole industry.
It's fantastic. His name is Will Wells. He's the founder of Hummingbird. We're going to talk here in a second about how then he goes about getting paid himself, and then how that the whole system works for one of his companies. I'm going to have him give us an example. Get ready to bring me an absolute, just a regular example. And then also we're going to talk about carbon. About midway point of the show here, I want to remind you that you can always find my stuff, as I said, online at my damianmason.com site, but you can also go to YouTube and please hit subscribe when you go there. Also subscribe to this podcast, dear listener or viewer. And I want to tell you about something new I'm working on. I've been not really telling anybody yet, but I can tell you. Extreme Ag is a collection of a half dozen progressive, forward-thinking, successful farm operators of scale. And they have a site called Extreme Ag. There's no E on the farm, so it's just the letter X, Extreme Ag. And you go to extremeag.farm. They are now producing a podcast, or rather, I am doing that for them. So if you are a farmer and you listen to my stuff, you might do well to tune in over to Extreme Ag when we are rolling this out. It's in its infancy. We're going to be giving you great stuff you can use to apply to your farming operation. So go to extremeag.farm and check out what we're doing there. And stay tuned because it's going to keep getting better and better. All right, Will Wells. I took a little break and he got so bored he picked up his phone and started texting. You didn't see that if you're just listening, but I saw it because I'm watching here. And I've got 27 years of being on a stage in front of live audiences. And this little British guy thinks he's going to pull off a little stunt like that and me not see it. Who does he think he is? Will, let's talk about what things you are monitoring and then how you go about getting paid. Because, okay, I'm a big company. I say, hey, I want to make sure that that those soybeans that are being raised, whether it's in Indiana, where Damian's from, or in Brazil, are adhering to these standards. And I'm curious. Tell me, take it from there.
So Damian, I mentioned the monitoring for $1, farmers getting paid $15. Essentially, when there's a financial transaction that's tied to sustainability, there's always a fee or a small amount that goes to a verification partner. Uh-huh. I guess that's kind of what we're doing. So imagine you're a large corporation, maybe a water company that wanted to look at cover cropping across 100,000 acre river catchment. Hummingbird would be measuring exactly which field uses cover crops so that a financial reward can go to those farmers that are farming responsibly near a water source. And we would get a small fee as part of that. That would be a classic Hummingbird financial setup.
Got it. All right. So you talked about these companies are paying you. I don't know anybody that's getting a premium from Cargill for raising things a certain way. Am I missing something?
Look, I think Cargill are involved in a number of proof of concepts, and I think for them it's probably 2 years deep. But I know, for example, there's at least a few 100,000 acres worth of farmers in the Midwest that are enrolled in a Cargill scheme that does exactly what we've described.
Okay. So it's happening. It's not happening in mass. It's happening at a beginning level.
It is. And then if you look at Canada, for example, I guess, the Canadian Fertilizer Institute has been, rewarding the responsible use of fertilizers through its NERP program for quite some years, right? So several 100,000 farmers, all of which use fertilizers, are all aware of that scheme. And it's so popular that I think the penetration is, into the 80s or 90s. So it's not as though the wider market is kind of immune to these kind of incentive schemes. I think that the business model has a lot of, when it comes out in the wash, it'll be very clear. But for now, it's a bit opaque.
Yeah. You are not only the first British person I've ever had on in 196 or 200 episodes, you're the first one that's ever described something as being opaque. All right. So carbon. We've had guests on talk about this. I'm ready to sell carbon, but it's still a very it's a nascent marketplace. Tell me where this is going from your perspective.
I think that I'm a capitalist, and I believe in
that's unusual in your country, isn't it?
Well, myself and Prince Harry, who hasn't been on your show yet, are both attracted to the US for its capitalist history. But
I appreciate that about Harry. He gets paid just to let People Magazine put pictures of him on his babies on there. So he's a baby image seller capitalist, I think.
I think the guy is doing something right. You asked me a while back, how do I get paid? Well, I think he gets paid for showing up in Silicon Valley and just being His Royal Highness. But all credit to him.
Former Royal Highness.
Exactly. Well, I think we could all do with a bit of Californian sun, and hopefully, if he starts producing almonds, then maybe he'll be on your show next.
That's right.
But
okay, so tell me.
So back to carbon. I think, look, 2 years ago, the world was kind of shocked by indigo and the sudden ascent of, what was then the second ag unicorn. I think Climate Core was the first. And I think that sort of peaked and has now troughed. And what we're seeing instead is the really large corporations like Rabobank or Yarra or Cargill establish their own carbon-based strategies. And it's a horses for courses thing. And if you talk to Nestle about sustainability, they'll say that something else is important. And not everyone values carbon. But I think that there's enough focus on carbon emissions, carbon sequestration, and agriculture being this amazing opportunity. Farmers have been the bully boy of consumers and the press for so many years, but I think this is a wonderfully seminal moment that we see food production in climate positive terms, as well as we need to feed ourselves and it being a basic right and food security.
Yeah, I see that also. When do we get to where I can just log on and say, oh, you know what? 3 years from now, I'm going to get paid more for my carbon from this place or this place. When does it get to where it's just like buying an airplane ticket?
My prediction is that by 2022, it will become so mainstream that the wider mass market, particularly in the US and Canada, will all be doing this. I don't think the planet or the public will allow it to, become a 10-year journey. I think that there's so much momentum, and with Biden's administration and recent policy changes, this is not going away. And I think it's almost an important thing for farmers to jump on board now, because it does take a few years of experimentation. We talk to farmers all the time that want to switch to no-till, but they're worried about how to manage, weeds and weed control in those intermittent years. It's not like turning on a light switch. So I think that the best farmers are already doing it, and I think the mass market is ready to move.
I see. All right. What else do I need to see when I look down because I'm pretty big on looking at the future, and I bring a lot of my stuff to my audiences. Again, from the consumer and marketplace standpoint, what thing are you seeing that we're not, or that I might not, or that my listeners may not?
So I think we can talk about vision and what we're not seeing, but what we want to see. And in my view, an American consumer will be able to go into Walmart, buy a bag of lettuce, scan the QR code on that packet of lettuce, and see how much herbicide and what happened to the soil in which that plant was produced, possibly even visualize the plant when it was being produced. And that traceability is not quite there, but that would be a huge moment for agriculture. So that's one thing.
The consumer says they want to know where their food comes from. Do you think that they possess enough knowledge to actually see that and understand it?
I think that, look, I've been in this industry a while and I'm learning things every day. And so the short answer is probably not. But I think that, this comes to the second challenge. What metrics do we follow? Is there a harmonization? Because the USDA says one thing and Indigo says another and the British government say another thing. I think that the world is getting closer to having a harmonized set of standards that consumers will trust and education will follow. I think at the moment it's confusing and different food retail companies do different things. So it is a bit of a minefield, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're saying there's just a whole lot of different stuff out there, and it's also there's the conflicting misinformation. A company that wants to sell something goes and tells an ignorant consumer base this, and then it's like, no, that's not even accurate, whatever. Do you get excited? You see what's happening? Because I look out there and I tell my people that I live half the year in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm around people that are not farmers. And then they tell me some horrible thing they saw and that we're all going to die. And I say, that's not even true. I said, we're using less natural resources to produce every calorie of food than we ever have in the history of mankind. We're doing better by our resources. Developing countries, not so much, but you've got to be excited. You know, a big customer, your customer base is Australia, Europe, and North America. We're doing pretty damn good, aren't we?
I think we're doing all right. And I don't know, when we founded Hummingbird, no one was talking about soil health. And thanks to a gentleman called Gabe Brown, lots of your listeners would have read his From Dirt to Soil book. You know,
I have read his book. And I have had him on this very show. He has been a guest on the Business of Agriculture, and he's a pioneer of regenerative agriculture, which I believe in, although I think it does have a few limitations. And so I see a future where we see much of what Gabe Brown's pioneering, along with some of the best usage of technology and current stuff, and some stuff that's yet to be pioneered. That's where I see the future going.
I think so. And I mean, I get excited because, you know, 9-year-olds ask me about soil health. And, you know, people go to meetings and they talk about mycorrhizal activity or fungal neural networks in the soil. And, you know, the public knowledge of farming, where your food comes from, has like captured the imagination, as anyone that follows Netflix will notice. So I am encouraged. I'm an optimist. And I do think that will bring about great change. And what going back to the Gabe Brown story, what I like about that is that it's not some inner city vertical farm metropolitan idea of how food should be produced. The guy is producing massively impressive yields on proper North Dakotan soil. And he's doing it in a way that is so innovative. And that there's hope in that, if nothing at all.
Mm-hmm. And you think that a company like yours then just helps make those practices? Because one of the things that even some of my big pure farmers don't like it when I talk, I rail against tillage. I say tillage destroys soil structure. We've over-tilled. We've caused erosion and compaction issues from too much tillage. And so I believe that the regenerative thing that appeals most to me is, again, about usage of cover crops and reduction of tillage, because that's what keeps soil healthy. And you guys can monitor that there at Hummingbird.
I think so. And the key now as well is how data is connected. So, for example, if you drive a John Deere tractor, your data will be stored in your account as part of JD Ops. And businesses like Hummingbird have no interest in that data other than to verify that something happened so that the farmer gets paid. And I think the more connectivity we see, whether it's between CNH, John Deere, class vehicles, or whether it's, you know, through platforms like Truterra or Climate, I think that the more connectivity and the more data integration we have, hopefully those rewards will be unlocked because the data's there. And what we really want to happen is for these enormous carbon schemes to start up and farmers that are already being sustainable to retrospectively be paid for changes they made back in 2016 or 2017. That's the dream.
Yeah, and there are people that are being paid for stuff that happened 3 and 5 years ago, am I right?
You're correct. And I think it's NORI or one of the other US carbon trading schemes. I think they allow for a 10-year retrospective payment. So, you know, it's one of the first questions we get asked is like, doesn't this just favor people that aren't farming sustainably? Well, hopefully those that are pioneering will get the biggest rewards.
Mm-hmm. How big is the marketplace going to be? By the way, use American dollars, not British pounds and not euros.
If the indigo,
you know what? You damn British people. I mean, where's the sense of humor? I was making a fun little thing there. You don't even smile. Must be tired over there.
We like the humor. We just don't always smile to joke back. But I think if the indigo deck is to be believed, it's $1 trillion market that's coming. I'm a little bit more cautious, but I think there's something more important at stake, which is if you look at the market capitalizations of Kellogg's, General Mills, Nestle, you add them all together and you think how central to those brands' survival is being sustainable, being able to report to their shareholders and consumers that they're carbon neutral. That's the real value. All of these enormous businesses need to be sustainable. All of these many, many, many farmers all around the world are being pushed and pulled into this movement. And I think the market potential is in the hundreds of billions, if not trillions, as a result. But it's
you're seeing it just the way I am, that these companies, and they can't just go out and keep imposing it on you. I mean, that does happen, right? Kroger came out, it's a big grocery store chain here, like 7 years ago, and said all eggs by the year 2022, 2023, 2021, whatever it was, all eggs are going to be cageless. And I'm like, well, that's neat, but are you paying folks to switch over all those hen houses? And then Taco Bell followed suit. Of course, Taco Bell cracks like 3 eggs a day. So it was a meaningless gesture, but they just wanted to get the PR. So I'm like, if you keep imposing this on your producers, this is a business. You got to also make sure you're compensating for these new standards you're putting in that actually cost money to implement. So we don't have dollar amounts, but you're seeing it happen. You're saying it's going to happen. That it's going to be that the money is going to have to be spent, that these massive companies, General Mills, can't sell Cheerios and tell everybody they're sustainable unless they truly are putting their money where their mouth is.
I think so. And I mean, look, a classic use case is McDonald's. And in my view, McDonald's has been one of the most pioneering ESG brands on the planet. And whether it's, buying responsible beef, or whether it's, encouraging its potato suppliers to use less water to produce the fries that we all love, they are a great example of giving their suppliers a year to get into the groove. These are the new standards. You've got a year to adapt. And if you don't adapt, we won't use you as a supplier. Mm. And if you talk to people in their supply chain, they'll say that, there's huge amounts of thought and effort that goes into collaborating with farmers and ranchers who show them the way that it's possible to produce beef in a way that, protects the native landscape, or improves biodiversity, or indeed sequesters carbon in soils.
I got it. So, I've been telling my agricultural audiences here of the last year that ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards are going to be a big, increasingly important part of our production side of it, because these companies, these brands, want to be able to tell their story that to their consumer base. That and the thing is, a lot of folks in our business will get this wrong. They think about telling their story. God knows I've heard this from every farm person. We're going to tell our story. I'm like, they don't really give a damn about your story. They give a damn about your story if it makes them feel good about themselves, because consumers want to feel good about themselves. The consumer goes to McDonald's and says, I don't feel guilty about eating these French fries. You know why? I know they were sustainably produced. And then McDonald's just continues to promote that story, and it makes their customer feel good about eating French fries. And what does it do for you? Well, you're an Idaho potato producer. You had to go to drip line irrigation or something to reduce your water consumption so that they could tell a story.
Exactly. Look, I think everyone is focused on the science here, and everyone's focused on solving the same problem. And as a startup founder, I come into contact with so many exciting businesses of the future that are tackling this problem. There's a great business in the US called Benson Hill, recently sold through a SPAC for over $1 billion. And they're really focusing on plant breeding and using gene editing and DNA sequencing to unlock those combinations that can sequester more carbon. What plants can we breed that put more carbon back into the soil? I mean, there's so much microbial or sort of biological stuff going on as well. So I think that this truly is a problem that's being attacked from so many different angles. Hummingbird and remote sensing is one of them, but plant breeding and DNA sequencing is another. And what's exciting is that, it's all coming together, and the data is beginning to talk to each other, and it's actually beginning to work.
His name is Will Wells. You got anything else to share? Will, do so. But before you do that, if anybody wants to look up your company, where do they find you? Hummingbirdtech.com.
We're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. Add me on LinkedIn. It's Will Wells. And look, we love chatting to people. We love partnerships. We love talking to farmers just to hear their problems. So it's been a real pleasure, Damian, to be on the show. And hopefully
you guys are in this for the long haul, 5.5 years, and you've got some huge clients. So you're going to be out here. You're going to be the monitor of using AI, and you're going to be here. You're going to be a big player.
Let's hope so. And it's just a privilege to be part of the race.
Yeah. And you maybe come over and buy a farm down the road from me. We get together and drink some British pints once in a while.
We'll have a beer for sure.
All right. His name's Will Wells. My name's Damian Mason. You've been listening to the founder of Hummingbird Technology. Go to hummingbirdtech.com and check out their company. They're doing some interesting things. And this is where the business of agriculture is going from a production standpoint. You heard it there from him, and you've been hearing it from me for a while. More ESG, more monitoring, more being able to talk about sustainability and actually being able to verify it. And that's where his company comes in. Thanks for your thoughts and your look ahead, my friend.
Cheers, Damian.
All right. Until next time, it's the business of agriculture.
Thank you for tuning into the Business of Agriculture podcast, sponsored by Land Trust. Land Trust partners with farmers and ranchers to capture pure profit from sportsmen seeking new experiences and places to hunt and fish. Land Trust built the platform and does the marketing. You maintain 100% control of access and activities, and you set the rules. There's no cost or obligation when you list, and the next 10 Business of Agriculture listeners who go to landtrust.com/BOA are eligible for a gift worth over $2,000.